when I look back now, all of the signs were there that I should be focusing on editing. I'm very organised and meticulous about kind of things, and I like things to be done in a certain way. I can look back now and see, oh yeah, I was born to be an editor, but I wouldn't have said that in college, no.
On this episode of Garry Talks Film, I'm joined by acclaimed film editor John Murphy, whose credits include Colin Kuhn and, most recently, the powerful drama Saipan. With a career spanning everything from independent Irish films to major international co-productions, John shares insights on the craft of editing, collaboration with directors, and how shaping a story in the edit suite can be just as creative as writing or directing. It's a must listen for anyone passionate about film.
The Oscars and the BAFTAs and everything, they were great. And the IFTA success and everything, that was great. But the main thing I think about it, you can't write the history of Irish cinema without mentioning The Quiet Girl. Like, you also can't rewrite the history of the Irish language in this century without mentioning The Quiet Girl. And that's something that we should be really proud of, you know.
Garry Talks Film, kindly supported by Grace on Demand Skillnet and the Rap Commission.
Podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Hello and welcome to Garry Talks Film. Before we kick off, I do have to say a huge thanks to Grace on Demand Skillnet and the Rap Commission, who have kindly supported this series where we focus on some of the key players in the Irish film and television industry. And I'm delighted to have my good friend and also one of the leading editors in Ireland, John Murphy, joining us on the podcast. John, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Pleased to do it. Happy to be here. Yes, yeah.
It's been amazing watching your career evolve and develop over the years. For those who don't know, we went to college together in Galway in the late 90s. We drove past that building on the way over to studio here, saying, wow, it's nearly 30 years since we first arrived into college, film school, not knowing what we were at.
No, I think you might have been the first person I talked to when I got in there, actually.
Okay.
So I think you're the first fellow member of the tribe that I met along the way. Yes.
Yeah. I remember everyone was asking you, where are you from? And you were saying Milltown. And there's just these blank faces.
Yes,
so your next response was, it's near Tuam. And everyone's like, oh, yeah. So, you know, I'm from Milltown. You put Milltown on the map since.
I wouldn't want to say that now. Certainly not. No, certainly not.
Back in the late 90s, there was no Netflix, there was no Amazon Prime. You couldn't get international movies. There was the odd shop around town that you'd get the odd strange, whereas cinema DVD, shall we say.
Yeah.
We weren't seeing anything like this. So by going to film college, our world was suddenly opened up to, wow, there's movies made outside of America and the UK. And
yeah, and actually that's what kind of film school is, isn't it? Is when you kind of go in and you kind of meet like-minded people and you kind of see and hear about other things. I remember we went in, I remember they showed us, like, one of the first couple of weeks, they showed us Singing in the Rain. And it blew my mind. Like, it absolutely blew my mind that, because I just kind of always thought musicals were a bit kind of naff. And then you see this movie that's just full of joy and love and laughter. And you're kind of going, I remember bouncing out of the room after seeing it. And it was great. And I think we were also shown Central Station by Walter Salas in the first couple of weeks. And it was that thing of realizing that, you know, like foreign language films, you know, they aren't just to be appreciated, they can actually be really, really enjoyable. It was like when I saw Takeshi Kitano's Zatoichi in the cinema, and it's like this, you know, amazing, artistic, deadly samurai movie, you know, and it's more enjoyable than any Hollywood blockbuster, but it's got subtitles on. You're going, oh, right, okay, films can be this as well. Also, what was true as well, that there's movies made in Ireland, you know.
True, yeah.
I think it's
a history of movies.
Yes, yeah, you know, I think as well, you kind of have to, you know, like, we're of a certain vintage, let's say. John born in 1980, and when we went to film school, you know, a lot of what we initially spent our first couple of weeks on was stuff that now, you know, my 8-year-old just instinctively knows. Like, you know, so things like the concept of what editing is had to be explained to us. You know, we had classes on typing and how to turn on computers. Like, you know, how to turn on an Avid took like 3 weeks of film school. You know,
because there was a method with the fans and the hard drive.
You know, it was a whole process. Whereas now, like I said, my 8-year-old knows about breaking the fourth wall. You know what I mean? Like they know the inherent the media literacy and the inherent grammar of how things are structured, or that there's someone who structures them, is people know that now at a really, really young age. So, you know, in films, I know this from talking to educators in the film sphere, like when they are meeting students now and they're 18, 19, they know how to make a story because that's what they're doing themselves in, you know, content creation and whatnot. Like, so they totally understand that, like, someone has to put it together. But when we were in college, it had to be explained to us. So it really was that thing of, like, it wasn't just that there was a world of cinema opening up to us and we were meeting all these new voices and new things that we hadn't kind of seen before. It was the whole process of how do you do it was all totally alien to us as well. You know?
And digital was just coming in for us as well. So when we went in, they had still the Steinbeck, whatever benches for your cutting your 16mm film. And we even got to shoot on film when we were in college.
Yeah.
But you had the Digibeaches, which were these enormous heavy cameras that cost about 95 grand.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or anything. So basically it was a case of you make a TV show or you make a film and that's it. There's no kind of other life to anything else after that.
And like, I feel very grateful that I got the opportunity to edit on a Steinbeck because, you know, when you're editing on film and you're editing on those Steinbecks, you know, every decision that you make, you have to kind of really think it out because if you can't just try something out, you have to kind of go, right, do I really want to try this out?
Yeah.
And you have a very physical relationship with the film. You know, you know that this is here and this is there. And I don't know how much of that I've carried into my career as an editor, but I know my thought process as an editor has benefited from it. I don't fully know how to articulate that, but it definitely has that thing of, like, I understand that it's a physical, like, a live thing, and that, you know, when you go and you kind of start putting things together, that's what you're doing. They are fragments of a storybook, you know. So I feel very grateful to have had the opportunity to do that. It was a pain in the arse. And, you know, I'm certainly not romantic about it. Because you had to hang
the celluloid on a bin as well, and sure, it missed the hook and it'd land in, it'd be piles of celluloid all in this big wooden box. And
like trying to find the 4 frames that you need, like, forget about it. Yeah. You know, there's no going back, but I'm glad that got the opportunity to do it. You know, I think it's also important that, you know, things are continued to be shot on film because there's a texture to that. And I think there's something very organic and alive about film. I just don't want to cut on film. You know, shoot on film is fine. Cut on film.
But I thought you would have gone down the route of being a director, and you had worked with us on a few shorts that we had done in the early days for RTE, and you were a first AD and you were brilliant. You got everyone to quieten up on the floor, and you kind of kept the pressure on the director to keep moving and make adjustments if needed, so we weren't running over time, which as a producer was a delight. So it's like, wow, you know, I think he'll be a director. God, he's a really good first AD. Didn't see the editing coming into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You know, you don't necessarily know how things are kind of go. Like that, when I look back now, all of the signs were there that I should be focusing on editing, and it kind of happened totally by accident. But yeah, I did a good bit of first AD work, and I was working in a record store here in Galway in Chicago's, and that was like my summer job and a job during college, and I loved it. I had a great time there. I got a job as a second AD. A friend of mine was first ADing it, and I went on set for a day. It was Eamon Little was the director. We were on set, and I did that for a weekend, and I was, you know, third AD, I think, and I was standing on the field someplace in Corrandulla and stopping traffic for, you know, it was really terrible. I was looking at cheap, you know, but I did that on a Saturday, Sunday, and I went into Chicago on Monday and handed in my notice and kind of went, if I'm going to do this, I kind of actually have to kind of go and do it, you know, that I could have been very comfortable staying in Chicago's and just kind of plodding along. And I went on the dole and kind of was like, I'll see what kind of opportunities come along. Now, it was 2001 or whatever. You could kind of afford to do that. You could afford to live in the city. You could afford to maybe kind of chance your arm going on the dole for a couple of months. And, you know, your parents could give you a few bob, but it wasn't going to break the bank for them either, you know. And then we had our editing lecturer in college in our third year. She went on maternity leave, and another editor came in to replace him, the one and only James Finlan. And James had agreed to edit a short for someone, and then at the last minute he had to back out. I had gotten on very well with James, just on a kind of personal level. We kind of had hit it off, and he asked me would I do it, and I hadn't really ever considered editing before. And there I was. I sat down on some Monday morning in October looking at rushes for a scene, and this is Final Cut Pro. I'd never looked at it or used it before. I sat down and that was it. I was cut the short, and it did well, and you know, and then another James had something else that came along, and then another short, and then all of a sudden I was an editor, and it just kind of totally happened by accident. But like, I think back on it now, it makes an awful lot of sense. Like, my mother's a librarian. I have a certain part of that kind of librarian in me, and then I'm very organized and meticulous about kind of things, and I like things to be done in a certain way. I've always been very good at kind of structure of things and how things should be kind of laid out. I'd also be relentless, I guess you could say, in kind of like pursuing an idea to its to its endpoint. And so that I can look back now and see, oh yeah, I was born to be an editor, but I wouldn't have said that in college. No, I was, I wanted to be a director. I wanted to be a cameraman before I wanted to be an editor. I wanted to be all those things. So I left college, and I was here, and James had given me a few things, sent my way, and I did a couple of shorts and just kind of knocking around Galway, and that had done quite well. And then James got offered the chance to direct the pilot episode of Kilnaskully for RT. Okay. And it was very low budget, and it was RT were taking a chance on it. And he asked me would I come and cut the pilot because I was young and cheap. James knew me, and he kind of also knew that if it didn't go well, he could kind of step in and do it himself, because James was an accomplished editor. I was living in Scotland actually, and I came back for a month and did that. And then I came back to Ireland later that year, and that got commissioned. The pilot was a huge success at Christmas, and then I got commissioned for a series. And so I ended up in summer of 2024. I was like the editor of RTE's like flagship sitcom. But I was 23 actually. Yeah, I wasn't 24 yet. I was 23.
Because Pat Short was huge back then as well. Everyone in the country adored him.
Yeah, it was massive. Like, the thing was a huge, huge hit. But yeah, so I was doing that during the summer. And it was myself and Declan McGrath, we were the two editors on it. And Declan was great, and it was a great mentor to me then and now, as James has always been as well. Kind of took me under the wing and made sure any mess ups I did that they could kind of cover for me, because I actually had no clue what I was doing. And,
but you're cutting comedy as well. Like, that's an art in itself. Totally,
yeah. And it's it's not easy. Like, it really isn't. And also, it was like we knew after the pilot, like, this was going to be a hit, so like it had to work. Like,
it's that reality of it's gotten commissioned. Yay! Oh, now we got to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Panic stations.
Yeah, but it was great because I was like, like I said, I was 23. They put me up in Limerick. They paid for all my food. I had more money than sense. It was great. But then the winter, I was back here in Galway and scrounging around for any kind of assistant work I could get, like money runs out pretty quick, and so then it was that interesting thing of having the reality of like the show was on air because it goes out during the winter, where I was kind of like unemployed for most of the time, and kind of, so I was splitting my time between being the editor of the RT's #1 show, and then in the winter doing assistant editing, which was like loading tapes for Power Pictures here in Galway, and doing that, and Dave giving me a bit of work here and there, and that's actually how I learned to be an editor. Like,
and during this period then of kind of the winter, work wise and physically, did the thought creep into your head of maybe I just need to, get that job in a retail store?
To be honest, no. It's a different time as well. I think you have to kind of stress that. Like, the 2000s, yes, it was the Celtic Tiger, but it was still, rent was affordable. You could actually be in your 20s and give it a go.
Yeah.
Later on, in my later 20s, it was definitely kind of harder because, rent was higher, and, and the 20s, it's true. It was true then, but it's way worse now that, in your 20s, the transition from college into a career is extremely difficult. There's a huge attrition rate. Like, the amount of people who fall off by the age of 25 because it's too hard. Like, there's no way you can earn a living from it. Like, you really have to keep at it. You have to choose to keep at it. And for a lot of people now, you have to stay at home. It's impacting who is doing it as well. It's people who can afford to stay at home. It's people who can their parents can afford to have their child kind of humiliate themselves for 10 years for no money, and eventually it might kind of work out. No, I never really thought about kind of giving up. I loved it. Like, I loved it, and I knew this is kind of what I wanted to do. I was having a lot of fun as well, and there was enough work that it was like that you could keep at it. I was never really unemployed for longer than kind of like 3 weeks. So like there would always be something. There'd always be like a week of loading tapes here. So I did a lot of work for Power Pictures,
which led into doing work with Tommy Tiernan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then,
So you were like the comedy editor then all of a sudden as well. You're working with Pat Short and Kilnaskully, Tommy Tiernan's DVDs.
That's right. I did Tommy's and Joe Rooney's DVDs, and I did a DVD for Pat as well. One Christmas, I remember I walked into Chicago's and they had like a wall of DVDs, and I'd cut like 4 of the top, like 6 of them. It was kind of wild. But yeah, I ended up doing a version of Tommy's Loose show, and that was totally Dave Power giving me a chance. Like he was like, let's try this out. I hadn't really edited anything for Dave before. David was great. Like I learned how to edit with David Power, like really, because we did a TV series, Tommy Jokerman, Tommy Tiernan in America. That was a little later, maybe 2005 or 6. And I remember we spent like 2 weeks on a 1.5-minute montage of like Tommy touring Ireland before it was transitioning from touring Ireland into, and we just tried it. We worked it so hard, and David never settled for like it being good enough. It always had to be great.
Yeah. And
like that's actually how you learn how to be good, is that like you don't ever settle for it to be kind of it'll do, you know. Yeah. And you know, I'm sure that wasn't easy for Dave, having to put up with me not being as quick as maybe some of the other editors he had, but like you learned how to do it. And then I edited for Dave for 10 years after that, you know, on and off, you know, so, and loads of Tommy DVDs and things. Yeah.
And like, what was keeping you working where you were only maybe off for 3 weeks? Was it people saying, oh, give John a chance, he's a good guy? Or was it you actively trying to build relationships with people?
I never really actively kind of sought out to kind of build relationships. It just kind of happened fairly organically. One thing kind of led into another. I think what was a big factor too, though, was that for those years in the 2000s, I was largely based in Galway. I was going between Galway and Limerick for Kilnaskully. You know, I have a bit of Irish. Galway's a smaller pond.
Yeah.
And there was definitely less of us around then. I kind of bounced from one job with Abu Media, one job with Power Pictures, you know, job with somebody else, you know, and you just do kind of a little bit here and a little bit there. And there was always something, and you have to be kind of game for anything, you know. Yeah. So there was always kind of something coming up, you know. And so, yeah, like I said, it was a smaller pond, and that kind of helped a lot. Whereas I think if I had been in Dublin and I'd been in the kind of edit system, you know, the thing of like starting as a runner in a post house, working your way up to be an assistant, maybe getting a chance to cut something. And I have friends who did that and are very successful now at it, but like they were getting their first broadcast credit on TV in their early 30s.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, by the time I was 30, I had probably clocked up, you know, nearly 100 hours of broadcast TV. And, you know, sure, maybe 30 hours of that was 100 episodes of Bug Stuff for Boo Media, you know, a kids game show. But like, it all contributes.
Yeah,
you know,
you have like 75 credits, I think, on IMDb.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it is. Yes, yeah. You know, it's a lot. Like, yes.
But you moved to Dublin then.
Yes,
eventually.
Yeah, I moved to Dublin in 2010 after kind of years in Galway. We moved to New York first. We were in New York for kind of for a period, and then when I came back, work was part of it. You know,
there was more work, and
there was more work. You know, the recession that happened in 2007, the crash.
Okay, yeah.
So there was less work in and around Galway. There was a bit more uncertainty. Also, I just kind of felt like we needed to change the scenery, and we wanted to kind of get, you know, a lot of my friends had moved to Dublin, and the work was kind of there. I knew a lot of producers up in Dublin as well. That I'd been offered a feature, King of the Travellers, and that was kind of based in Dublin. So just kind of made sense to go and do that. And yeah, and then I was in Dublin for 10 odd years. Yeah.
And compare the time in Dublin to the West. What was the difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's also, you have to kind of remember as well, in Galway in the 2000s, I was in my 20s, and in Dublin I was in the 30s. So there are different stages of your life as well. You know, like that's a key thing. In Dublin, the work was better when you wanted to kind of move into features, which I was hoping to do. Kind of had to be in Dublin for that. I think there's more opportunities now down the West, but back then there certainly wasn't. I had been working for the same people in Galway for 10 years, and I kind of just wanted to expand my, and I had been working, you know, with companies up in Dublin, and I knew there was opportunities there. You know, people had wanted me to go up to do things, and I had gone up and done things. And I just kind of thought I could do some different stuff up there. So I ended
Which is funny, because it was say in your 30s, if you wanted to work on features, you know, taking place in Ireland, you were having to go to Dublin. Now in your 40s, you're working on features that are being shot all around the world with a director in Lisbon and footage coming from Switzerland or something initially. Yeah. And just how another 10 years, how that has changed now, where you don't need to, totally, I suppose, be in Dublin anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID had a lot to do with that as well, and that it proved that people could work remotely, and also that it kind of suited a lot of directors to work remotely. The perceived notion was always that the director needed to be sitting behind you the whole time, and they need to be in the room. You need to work it out, and that is true. Like, in certain circumstances, that is absolutely categorically true, that you do need to do all that, and and that is where a lot of the creative magic happens. But on certain other projects, you don't. And the truth is that Dublin is like a lot of European capitals, is an expensive place to be.
Yeah.
Rent is difficult for a lot of people, but it's also, while that might be true for you as an editor, it's even more so true for directors and producers. Editors and camera people have the luxury of, like, what we do is a craft. So that means that someone always needs us. It's like being a carpenter, like the house is being built. So like you will be needed to do the work at some point. So if whatever job, like a job that you were supposed to do falls apart, another one will come along and you will do that. That's a blessing. For directors and producers, it's like, if something falls apart, it's years of their life that they've put their heart and soul into, and it's fallen apart at the last minute. That's absolutely heartbreaking. And they can't just go and take another job in 2 weeks' time in the way that editors and camera people can, and costume designers and other heads of department. Like, we can just kind of move on to something else, and it's no big deal, you might be sad about it, but you move on.
Gotta feel bad now that I want to be a producer.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like,
it's so true though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how directors do it. Like, they take so long to get a project off the ground, and then it kind of falls apart. For directors, the idea then of like, oh, actually, I can kind of live in Cavan, or I can live in Leitrim, and it doesn't cost anything, and I can write, and I can be up here, and I can do all of this kind of hustle from here, and I'm not spending an arm and a leg, but I'm not earning anything, and my editor can be in Galway, or my editor can be in Argentina, and it's absolutely fine. Maybe I go see them for a week, maybe I go see them for 2 weeks, but hey, I could spend 2 weeks in Galway. At least I'm not like spending 2 weeks in London or Manchester in a hotel room. Like, it's...
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's worked out. But COVID had a lot to do with that.
Was that part of the decision then to return back to the West?
Yeah, I was working on Jim Sheridan's film about Sophie Toussaint de Plantier for Sky when COVID happened, and we couldn't go into the edit suite, so I had to edit at home, and we were in a little kind of 2 up, 2 down space in Dublin. My son would wake at like 7:30, and then I'd get him up, and then I'd have to build my edit suite in his room, take it down at 12:30 again so that he could go have a nap, set it up again at 2:00, and put it down again at 7. Jim couldn't come and see me because, it being what it was, he was 5 kilometers away. So we kind of tried to meet a few times wearing masks and everything. It just didn't suit Jim's personality. And then my wife was pregnant, and we were like, we kind of always talked about moving west anyways in some degree, and the school we wanted was down here, and just kind of made sense. So we decided to come back. We kind of figured if we're going to do remote, we may as well do remote, but in a space where it actually suits us, and give it a shot. And that was in 2020. And then I started working remotely from July, August, September, on things, and I've been doing it ever since, really, for the most part. Most part, yeah.
So little do people know that Multilingual, The Quiet Girl, which got nominated for Best Feature Foreign Language, first Irish language film ever to get an Oscar nomination, was edited remotely during COVID from Athenry.
That's correct. Yes. So it was edited in my spare room, in the spare room of the house we were renting before we bought. So I cut it there. It was shot in September 2020, and I didn't actually sit down. And so we started editing as we were cutting it. Okay. And Colm and I didn't actually sit in the same room together until the last 2 days of the edit in March 2021. So we weren't actually physically in the same space at all throughout the 4 or 5 months of the editing of it.
And I suppose up till then you were used to the director being beside you, behind you.
Totally. Yeah, especially for a drama. Absolutely. And we had to improvise. It was all kind of like our setup was like stuck together with sellotape basically, but it was because you were cutting and feeding it through Zoom to him or whatever. Yeah. So it was just coming out of my laptop coming out of my desktop into Zoom, and we're sending it over Zoom, and he was like in a tiny little box in the corner, and that was it.
Because frames hadn't really been invented yet at this stage either for
pretty much
virtual editing.
Yeah, pretty much. It was all like hodgepodge, like I was reading blogs and like texting my editor friends going, what are you doing? And it was all very like higgledy-piggledy, and but it worked for us. And it weirdly, actually, it like, it's better being in the room, but there is something about the remote which is really good. And a couple of films I've done since then as well, Frawica and Báite, were done in part over Zoom as well.
Okay.
And the directors of that would also say what's really good about it is that when it's on, it's very hyper focused when you're down through it. Like you're not coming in and kind of going, oh, how are you? Geez, you watched the match last night, or like I watched a great film last night, or like what did we get for lunch? It's like, right, we're both in our respective kind of houses, and it's right. Where were we? Scene 21, and you still have the chat, and you still have a bit of banter, but you're looking at the screen. That's your window into the other person's world, and that screen is fully made up of the film.
Yeah,
you do actually kind of. It's really good actually for kind of the assembling process of it, of putting something together as you're doing it, because you're kind of watching things, and there is a kind of hyper focus to it, which is really good. But it was funny, like Colm and I, both our kids are kind of the same age, and we were both kind of trying to hide the fact that we were at home working from the kids. So we would both kind of do things like, we would say goodbye to the kids and go out the front door and then go around the back and try and sneak back upstairs and kind of hide. And there's a couple of times we'd have to both be like super quiet because our kids were running around in the hall behind the locked door. So it was a surreal experience, of trying to edit in kind of in secret. And just like jumping under tables when the kids come in and having a look around. And it was, but it was great,
When did you know that An Cailín Ciúin was becoming something special?
Well, so usually when you cut something, the first assembly, you show the director the first assembly. You assemble it as it kind of goes along. And a lot of the time when you're assembling the movie for the first time, you're assembling it to kind of you're checking that they have everything that they need.
Okay, yeah.
Rather than necessarily, and oftentimes those scenes are in isolation from each other, so they're not necessarily. They're not related to the scene that come beforehand. They kind of, you have it in your head, but it's not until you see them together that you go, oh, actually, I kind of see, Usually the first assembly, when you sit down to watch it, it's like, it's painful and it's arduous and it's awful and it's twice as long as it needs to be. It's usually a terrible wake-up call for the director, because they're like, oh, Jesus, this is going to be something. And so when Colm and I sat down to watch the first assembly of The Quiet Girl, it was all of those things. Like we were watching it and kind of going, geez, there's a load of work to do. But both of us were in tears at the end of it. And you kind of go, right, well, like, it works. Like, there's something to this. Like, all we have to do now is not get in the way of it, So, a film like that, it's twice as long as it needs to be. There's loads of scenes in it that were cut out, and there's loads of scenes that were shortened and kind of things, and dialogue dropped and all this kind of stuff. But, like, if fundamentally, when you sit down and watch that first assembly and kind of go, right, Jesus, we have an ending. Like, it works. Like, the end, especially the film like An Cailín Ciúin, where it's so dependent on casting.
Yeah.
If you miscast that girl, like, the whole thing doesn't work. I mean, it's true of any film. Like, whether a film is a success or not, it's such a weird alchemy of things that have to happen. There's no guarantee that anything is going. You might be on set and going, this is the best thing ever. This is so much fun. And then it falls flat in its face. Or it just takes one featured extra or one background extra to break the magic of the scene, to break the audience's concentration. And that you lose the audience for that scene, and you lose them for that scene, and then you kind of lose them a bit for the next scene, and then they're gone. It can happen so easily. And it's so hard to kind of keep people in that zone. From the start, even from when we were just assembling it, we're like, this girl is fantastic. And like half the battle of the film is won because she's great. But Colm and Cleona and Kate knew how to get everything out of her to make her as great as possible. And then my job when in the edit was to protect that performance, in every capacity. So just not to really let it shine and not get in the way. Not to overthink things and just not get in the way of the film at all.
Is that where you think films sometimes fall? Is that people have just been miscast by the director.
Yeah, I mean, I think casting is an absolutely central part of it. And I think especially with films with kids in it. You know, if you get that wrong, you're goosed. You know, it just takes one person to be miscast, and it kind of hurts the film. You know, it's a huge part of it, but then a huge part of it can also be like that you have the right costumes, and you know, it's everything. Like, and that's the job of the director, is that they have to think of absolutely everything. You know, I think you get the casting wrong, it doesn't matter how good the script is. You know. The wrong actor in it, and that's it. It's done, you know.
So where were you when you found out that Colin Kuhn had gotten an Oscar nomination?
We were all we all went up to Dublin to the Stella Cinema in Rathmines. We knew it had been shortlisted in the bottom 15. So we all went to the Stella. We rented it out for the day, and there was maybe 40 or 50 of us in there, and some heads from TG Carr and Screen Ireland and whatnot. And we watched it live on the big screen. Yeah, they listed out the names, and it was in alphabetical order, and just so happened that a lot of the films that were nominated that year were all like quite early in the alphabet. Argentina, 1983, All Quiet on the Western Front, EO. So we were kind of going like, we're running out of spaces here. Like, is it going to be us? And then it got called out, and we all went spare. Like, it was.
So they called it out as The Quiet Girl as opposed to Colin Kuhn.
Yes. Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, it was just amazing, like an amazing thing, you know, because like Colm and I, like I met Colm and Cleona. I cut a series for them called Ceol Drama for TG Carr, lovely little kind of 4-part series about kind of Amdram kids in schools in Gaelscoilne. We just met for like a cup of tea in 2013 and kind of hit it off with them instantly. And I'd done a few other films for them. So like we were at each other's weddings, and like at Colm and Cleona's wedding, Cleona was making a speech, and she went like, you know, someday we're going to make a feature film together. I'm going to produce it. Colm's going to direct it. Hopefully John will cut it. We're going to take it out into the world and see what happens. And for her to say that in 2015 or whatever it was, and then here we were in 2023, and it's been Oscar nominated, like, it's amazing, you know, and you know, we all knew that the film was really good, but like your expectations for what a film like that can do, you know, Arrocht had kind of like, you know, done amazing, you know, like it had earned 150,000 at the box office for an Irish language film. That was like unprecedented.
Yeah.
For Colin Kuhn, you know, we knew we thought it would get into a good film festival, and we thought like it would probably get the Irish Oscar nomination, but like, you know, we were like, you know, you can't even begin to kind of imagine that it would go to the BAFTAs, that it would go to the Oscars. But like, it was in cinemas for a year.
Yeah, that's right, actually.
It earned £1 million at the Irish box office. Like, it was a cultural thing. And actually, the main thing that I you know, the Oscars and the BAFTAs and everything, they were great. And the IFTA success and everything, that was great. But the main thing I think about it is that I'm most proud of is that you can't write the history of Irish cinema without mentioning The Quiet Girl. Like, you also can't really write the history of the Irish language in this century without mentioning The Quiet Girl. And that's something that we should be really proud of, you know, that like it became a fundamental part of the conversation about like Irish cinema, about Irish identity, about the Irish language. And that's something to be immensely proud of. And that's something that, like, you know, when you start out in this business, that's what you kind of hope for, that you'll contribute to something, irregardless of its box office or its reward success. You want something that will be part of the national conversation, and it certainly was.
Yeah.
And
but it
remains.
Has created a revolution now, because suddenly the financiers, the distributors, the writers, they're all interested in actually creating Irish content.
Totally. I mean, that's the thing, you know. I mean, you saw at the Fleadh this year, there was, you know, nearly 10 or 11 Irish language features added in various capacities. And like, it's not just the Cine Carr films, you know, like Kneecap wasn't a Cine Carr film. Like, people kind of tend to think that. It wasn't. It was like, that was just funded as an Irish language film. Like, it wasn't through an Irish language scheme necessarily, you know. And look how much success that had, you know. And I think there's a market there, you know, and I think the success of, you know, during COVID again, the success of Squid Games and Parasite has shown that, like, people are prepared to watch stuff with subtitles. In fact, a lot of people watch stuff in English with subtitles now. So, like, the fact that it's in a different language is not an obstacle for its success. You know, I think what was
my
great,
eldest daughter actually watches everything with subtitles on now.
Yeah.
I used to watch for the complicated shows like Billions, where I couldn't figure out everything that's going on.
Yes.
But it's just, you actually consume the content better, I think, if you can see the text every so often, hop in and out of it, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's very true, you know. I mean, I do the same as well, largely, you know, because I don't want to turn the volume up too loud and the kids are asleep, you know. So like,
do you still get to watch movies as a dad now? Do you get to sneak in a movie every so often at home?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this year now isn't as good as previous years, but like last year I watched a film a day. Last year, I was 365 films last year. When I'm traveling, I watch a lot, you know, like, so I was away traveling on a film last year. So, you know, I was watching film or 2 films a night, you know, so I go out of my way to watch movies. I've been less good this summer now, but, yeah, no, I'm a big believer in that. You kind of have to, like, if that's what your job is, I think you have to be consuming. It's not even that you have to be sitting there watching, you know, the latest Bellatar movie, you know. I think you have to consume all types of movies, and you have to kind of see what's out there, stupid or not stupid, you know, and you kind of have to go, right, well, that's what the market is, and also see what other people are kind of doing, because I think it does subconsciously kind of foster ideas as to how you kind of do things. Weirdly now, because I split my time between feature docs and feature drama, I get to a point, especially on feature docs, where I'll go through spells where I'll watch a load of feature docs. I'll do a week where I just watch 10 feature docs. And it's usually at a certain point in the edit. And it kind of, what I watch kind of then feeds into what I'm doing on the thing. But also I get to a point where I can't watch any. Like I actually can't. Usually when it's getting towards the end, because then you're kind of going, oh, that was so good. And we're nowhere near that. We're nowhere near that. We have so much work to do. And then likewise, if I'm on a drama, sometimes I'll just go and watch a load of feature docs to kind of like, it just breaks you out of your kind of thinking, and it frees you up to kind of think about other things, maybe different approaches to things. And then you find little elements of the grammar of feature documentary making its way into like your drama films, you know, and vice versa as well. Yeah. It's really interesting. It's kind of odd, but I've noticed that I didn't realize I was doing it. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, I've just watched like 20 feature docs in the last 2 weeks. What was that about? Yeah.
And is there any feature that you've seen lately where you're like, or it could be a TV show or something where you're like, wow, the way that was put together has just been, it's changed the game?
Oh, geez, I don't know. It's a tough question. I'll give you an experience it didn't change the game or anything, but it's something I kind of admired. I watched a film during the year on Netflix, which it was just like a standard kind of Netflix film. It was like 2 big leading Hollywood actors. It was so by the numbers. Like everything about it was algorithms to within an inch of its life. I watched it and was like, oh man, like I could have gone up and had a cup of tea. I could have taken a phone call for 10 minutes, come back, and I wouldn't have missed anything. It did lots of this thing where it's a really common thing in Netflix now, where people will kind of go like, I'm holding a cup of tea. I'm going to read. Like they're telling you what they're doing because they realize that the audience are kind of on their phone as they're watching it. So like they describe what's happening.
That's mad.
It's once you notice it, it's really common. It's really annoying. So I watched this movie and then I kind of begrudgingly kind of half enjoyed it. It was like, I was like, oh, that was actually like pretty good. And I felt really sick after watching it because I was thinking about it for days afterwards going like, everything about that was just like constructed to just kind of pass 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Not really like, I'm supposed to forget. I can't even remember the name of it. Like, you know, I'm supposed to forget. You're instantly, it's totally you just consume it and it's gone.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days later, I watched a Mark Wahlberg movie by Peter Berg called Deepwater Horizon. This was like a big Hollywood blockbuster from like 10 years ago. It's not even like, you know, I'm not picking out like, you know, some Iranian, you know, complex movie. It's about an explosion on a deep oil, like an oil thing out at sea.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
An oil rig, yes. And what I loved about it is that it didn't give a damn. It just didn't give a damn about explaining anything. It was just kind of going, we need to get the confibulator down from the contraptulator and put it into the thingy. And you went, okay, they're not explaining any of this to me. And I totally understand what's going on. They just drop you into it. And it was just a big Hollywood blockbuster of the kind they don't really make a huge amount anymore. It was from 2014 or something. I just love the efficiency of like the respect that Peter Berg had for the audience, while still delivering a big Hollywood blockbuster. And I went, that's actually how you can kind of make, you can kind of give people information and give people like story, and it can just be really enjoyable. And yeah, I've watched a lot of like Mark Wahlberg, Peter Berg movies ever since I watched, and I loved every single one of them. So that's a weird choice. It's not changing the game, but it was just
it's funny. I was watching Freaky Friday, the original, with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan with my 12-year-old last week, and afterwards I said, "Wow, it's like movies in the 90s. They just seem so simple." But they worked. They weren't trying to overly complicate things, or because I've turned away more from the big productions now that you're getting on your Netflix and Disney and so on, because I don't enjoy them. They just turn in my stomach. I'm looking more for the real interest.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are quite disposable. I mean, I think that they're designed to be disposable. It's like I said, you spit them out and throw them out again. I still haven't got around to watching it, but everyone says Nickel Boys is supposed to be really good in terms of editing, but I actually haven't watched it yet. I saw a documentary called Victor in Copenhagen, which had an amazing sound design in it. That was really good. It was about a deaf guy and was all through his hearing. It was amazing. I mean, there's loads of them, but yes, yeah.
Richie Conroy, who was on an earlier episode of Garry Talks Film in this series, he was saying to me that the most important thing in writing is the character, as opposed to the story. How do you, as an editor, then make the character come through rather than just trying to focus on the narrative of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a confluence of different things. I mean, so I think the actor's performance is a huge part of it. I think it also depends on the genre of filmmaking it is. Say something like The Quiet Girl, it's not really that dependent on plot. It's all character. It's all like looks and kind of subtext. So in a film like that, you have to kind of figure out what you want each scene to be about. And it's not necessarily in the dialogue. Dialogue is usually what moves kind of plot forward. What kind of moves people emotionally is kind of character, the arc of a character, and that's all about kind of performance. And so with that then it's about kind of finding rhythm and balance and having space for the actors to kind of like feel lived in. That's just kind of tweaking and getting the kind of minutiae of that right. In a genre piece, in kind of horror or thrillers, you kind of have to keep it kind of trucking. You have to kind of keep the clock is ticking. You're just kind of hoping that the character work that you do, a lot of times in those kind of movies, the kind of moments that you give to character, a lot of time the producers could be kind of like, do we really need that scene? You're like, well, yeah. So you kind of have to hope that you can do that work quickly while still moving the kind of forward story along. In a horror, it's a different type of thing. There's kind of, so I did a movie called Frauke, which is really interesting in terms of how you cut that film like that. You cut the scenes, you don't cut what happens. You cut the anticipation of what is going to happen.
Okay, yeah.
So if it's about like, there's a monster behind the door, you're not kind of cutting to the monster behind the door. You're cutting to the person going, I think there's a monster behind that door. And it's about the audiences and letting them have the space to go, oh, there's something behind that door. That's a different type of kind of cutting. So that it's not necessarily that like you have to keep it moving. You actually kind of have to slow it down, but keep it tense.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult kind of thing to do. But then within that, you would hope like that you've done the character work throughout the film, that you care about that person as they're approaching the dreaded door and that there's a monster behind the door. So
and then what about comedy then?
Comedy's hard, man. I mean, comedy is very, very difficult. It's all about timing and performance. And you really have to comedy can just not work. It can fall flat in its face. And it's also very difficult to do as well because it's a very hard market, I've worked on some comedies before and they're good films. I'm very proud of them. But like they don't have a chance in the international market because there's how many films get released every year. And if your comedy isn't Bridesmaid, then, or if it isn't like the big summer comedy, then it's going to get lost in the, it kind of has to, it can fall in between two stools really easily. If it's not that, then what is it? Then it probably has to be closer to kind of an art house comedy, which is kind of like a black humor type thing that not everyone's cup of tea, and it certainly isn't going to do well at the box office necessarily. And a lot of times with comedies, people hope that it's going to do really well at the box office. So you have to balance all that out. So they're hard to do. They're hard to edit because it's all about rhythm and timing and performances. And when you cut to the wide, when you don't cut to the wide, you know, when you cut to the close, like a lot of comedies is in wides, physical comedy. Sometimes comedies can be overburdened with dialogue as well. And, you know, if a joke isn't working, it isn't working. And also the thing with comedy as well is you really have to test it. You have to test it in front of an audience. So, because if you can have two jokes on top of each other, but if you don't leave enough room for the audience to laugh, they miss the second joke. So you actually have to stand in a room and kind of go, oh, people found that bit funny, but this bit that we thought was really funny isn't landing at all. And it may not be that it's that moment isn't funny, is that there's a bit beforehand that we lose the audience for a minute, so they don't pay attention to that joke. So yeah, comedy's hard, man. Yeah, it's no joke.
Because I wonder, you know, when you are editing a comedy, you know, you might laugh for the first few scenes that you've cut, but when you rewatch them 100 times, the laughter's gone. You're just like, but it could be the same with drama as well, where you're really moved the first few times you watch a scene, but then if you've seen it 100 times, it doesn't have that effect on you anymore. Yeah,
I mean, that's absolutely true. And I think it's especially true with comedy, that there's certain things that might make you laugh the first time you see it. You go, that's kind of funny. And you hope that an audience will find it funny as well. But then you obviously then see it like 100 times more and you kind of wonder about whether that's funny. But what also happens is that there'll be a line reading from one of the actors that you find hilarious because you've heard it 100 times. They just, a way they pronounce a word, something about it is just really, really funny to you and the directors, and you fall about laughing every time you hear it. And you put it in front of an audience and they don't even register it because they're too engrossed in the story and they're moving forward. You know, they're not paying any attention to it. Whereas we've been like, we've crafted it for so long that like we know every minutiae of it that you think it's hilarious, but no one else does. And then you're like, oh, right, okay. That didn't land. That didn't work at all. Yeah.
Sanatorium, that's up now. Well, it's been shortlisted for the Oscars.
Yes, it's Ireland's nomination. So it's in a big field. So it's up against, I think, 70 or 80 other countries. But
That's mad. I didn't realize.
Yeah, so it'll be shortlisted to 15 in December. And then that 15, then that's what they pick the 5 nominees from. So yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. You know, it's a tough ask though, you know, because it's a documentary. And
so you edited that documentary, which was shown in Galway.
Yes.
Won an award, I think, in Galway.
It won Best Documentary at Galway, yes, yeah.
And then you also edited Báite.
Yes.
Which won at the Galway Film Festival as well this year.
Yes.
You had a great year.
Yeah. It only took 30 films, 25 years. I literally it was my 30th film that I had. It's short it was the first one to win an award. So then 2 come along at the same time. Yeah, no, it was great. It was great flat, actually, I have to say, yeah.
But things have just taken to a completely new level now.
Well, I mean, what happens is that, you know, films kind of tend to come out in batches. So like at the 2022 flat, I had 4 films in that.
Wow.
And I had 4 films at this year's flat as well. But then I had nothing in the flat for 4 years before that. I had nothing in the flat last year. You know, so it's just, that's how it kind of goes, you know. So that things just they have different kind of life cycles, so that they just kind of come out at different times. Things just have a moment, you know, like they just kind of fit the moment. Sanatorium certainly fitted this moment, you know, like, you know,
So it was shot in Ukraine,
edited in Athenry. It's in Ukrainian, Russian, and a weird kind of dialect from Odessa. I don't speak any of those. So that was a challenge.
I know you have a bit of Irish, so it's like, okay, I can see how you were able to master editing on Colin Kuhn, but yeah, editing something in Russian and Ukrainian is...
Yeah, so with that we had wonderful Kate Melnick, who is a filmmaker, Ukrainian filmmaker, who has relocated to Ireland after the invasion, and she was based in Dublin, and she was kind of in charge of all the translation, and so she was on my edit team. It was for Venom, which is Ken Rodrup and Andrew Friedman's company, and Samantha Corr produced as well. They got all the stuff transcribed, and she checked it, Kate, and made sure that it was correct. And then I was given, like a day's worth of footage that had all the transcripts kind of. It was on a sequence so that I could move it around and I could adjust it if, you know, when we would kind of substitute bits of when we would cut stuff out, you know, and that's what we had to do. But it was actually really interesting because at the start I didn't have the subs, so I kind of just had to watch the material and I ended up cutting a lot of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have cut if I had all the dialogue to begin with, because you just kind of notice people's body movements and body language, and kind of you notice comedy, and the film's very funny, and a lot of it comes from actually me just sitting down watching the footage without subs for like a couple of weeks at the start, going like, oh, that's really funny the way he goes in there and shouts at that guy, you know. I don't know what he's saying, but it's funny. So then the subs would come in.
So did you have to go back then and say, oh, I better put this piece back in then? Or
when the subs kind of came in, we'd cut the scenes. And, you know, you take out 5 minutes of stuff because it's not necessary, you know. So we'd cut it together. We'd move what I usually do is I take a photo of each scene. I print out a photo and that represents a scene. You know, you'd get like 300 or 400 photographs, one representing each scene or certain kind of shots and beats. We lay them all out on the ground, and we kind of go, that bit's good, that bit's good. Maybe that bit could go before that bit. Actually, there's a connection. We divide it up into characters, and then you kind of go, actually, this person here is having lunch, that person there is having lunch. Maybe we could put the two of them like opposite each other, and what they're talking about could mirror what that, you know, like we
it's
find
storyboarding.
Totally, yeah. And then you find connections between them, or you find kind of thematic kind of beats that go between them, and you see bridges, and then you take all those photos and you put them up on whiteboards and you map it all out, and then that's your roadmap, and then you go to that, and then the roadmap changes completely. You do that again in like, you know, a month or 2 months time. When that's done, you just kind of keep cutting it, and then at the same time we're feeding the sequences back to Kate, our Ukrainian, to look at. And Ukrainian, the language is it's quite different from kind of the Latin Mediterranean languages or the Anglo languages, in that sometimes the verb can be at the end of a sentence. So someone can talk for a minute and a half, and we might be only using the first 30 seconds of it. But what would often happen is Kate would kind of come back and go, you're missing like the verb, and the verb would be here like a minute later. So we would have to go back and try and like figure out a way to get the verb into the sentence. So she would kind of structure out the sentence, like what would make sense to have that. So we'd have to move it around a little bit. So, you know, we wouldn't be changing what anyone was saying. We'd just be making them saying it quicker. You know, that was just a real. It was a process, like a real process. So that took 25 weeks to cut.
Wow,
not the longest film I've ever cut. But
so can you speak for Ukrainian?
I certainly not. I can say Slava Ukraine, and that's about it.
And you worked on Saipan as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing this.
So Saipan is out later in the year. It's premiering in Cork now shortly.
Oh,
yes.
Super.
Well, it's been on in
Toronto. It premiered in originally.
Toronto and London, and then London, and it's going to be on Belfast and Cork, and then it'll be in cinemas. So
whose side are you on, Mick or Roy's?
It's funny, when I was telling people I was on it, I was kind of joking that it's a bit like being on an Irish Marvel movie or something, because everyone's like, who's playing Dunphy? Who have they got playing you know, Steve Staunton? And you're kind of going, I don't want to say anything about it. Yeah, I really look forward to kind of seeing what people kind of think of it, you know. I love it. I think it's great. I think people are going to really love it. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah,
it'll be really, really interesting, because I know you're a soccer fan as
well.
Well,
it's interesting, Gary. Like, I've done years doing TV sports docs, years, and I'd often kind of say to people that actually it's a great, doing sports documentaries, great way to learn how to work on like drama, and because sport is inherently dramatic. You know, you've consistently got characters who are up against very clearly defined obstacles. You know, we have to beat Leeds to win the FA Cup final. You know, sports people tend to have very clear like definitions of what they want to achieve. You know, and that's what characters. You know, it's like setting goals for yourself, and that's what like in all sports people are all like that. They all are like, I want to win the World Cup, and that's the key thing. And they're like, the thing that's in my way of winning the World Cup is this manager, or you know, this Leeds United, or whomever, you know. And so you actually learn an awful lot about how to kind of structure things, and also how to structure kind of dramatic beats within things. Like, you know, I did a thing about Ireland in Italy '90, and you're dealing with a thing where everyone knows the result. So like, everyone knows that Ireland-England in the first game is 1-1. But you have to make it feel like, when the audience is sitting down and watching it, and they're watching the archive of it, you have to make them feel like, oh, England have scored, you know, like that there's some inherent risk involved, you know, You have to make them momentarily forget that this has happened. And that's all about cutting things in the present tense. So like in that scenario, we would never, when you're using interviewees, you would never let them talk from a perspective of the future. So they would never kind of go, and then of course when we won, when they scored, which we knew would all work out grand in the end. You would never do something like that. You would always kind of keep it in the moment all the time.
Yeah.
And what that does is it makes you build a sense of like being in the present tense. That's something I've taken into like all my drama work, and especially into my feature documentary work as well, that it's like, if you can make the audience feel like they're in the present tense, like that's, they're living it. They're living it with you, that all comes from sports docs. And I did loads of them. Yeah.
Brilliant. What are you working on at the moment?
I'm doing a film about over-tourism in Italy with the same director of Sanatorium. So Garry O'Rourke, I forgot to mention him earlier, who's from Ballinasloe.
Cool.
And he's just finished. They just wrapped last week. And we've just done that process of putting all the pictures on the board. And for the new film. So I'm on that now, and was for another couple of months, and we'll see what happens with that. And that'll be out next year. I think it's going to be great. So yeah, we'll see.
Excellent.
Yeah.
2 final questions then.
Yes.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to become an editor?
My advice for anyone who wants to enter any endeavor in the film industry is you have to keep at it. And you have to kind of plug away at it for as long as you need to kind of plug away at it. Consume art in every, movies, music, theatre, literature, whatever it is that floats your boat. Have a life kind of outside of that. Be sound, be my main thing. Like be sound, because the person you're working with, you never know who's going to be. If you're dumping on someone, that person could be the person who hires you in 10 years' time. You never know how that's going to go. Just be sound, because like I think what people don't hire you on the basis of your CV a lot of the time, especially if you're starting out as an assistant or whatever. What people want is they want someone who's not going to give them grief, because what they want is someone who can do the job. They assume you can do the job. They want someone who can do the job, that they enjoy being in the company of, who's not going to cause problems for them or the producers. And so if you're sound, that'll help. And people will give you a chance based on that. People are far more willing to kind of go, I'll give this person a go because they're nice, And
I think if you find out if you're not sound, you're probably not doing something that you love.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that is very true. Yeah. Yeah. And also I'd say surround yourself with good people as well. Like find a tribe and do stuff, shoot stuff, edit stuff, make yourself available. I know it's a lot harder than it was to kind of keep at it now because of the reality of, housing crisis. You just kind of have to keep plugging away at it, and opportunities will come in the weirdest places. And so much of it is, I can't stress this enough, so much of it is luck. It's total randomness, put yourself in a position to receive the luck, but at the same time, like it is all like, it's a pox that any of us get anywhere,
But as you said, we were chatting earlier before we started recording about, have you heard from such a person who we were in college with and so on? And you had said a line, I thought, wow, you hit the nail on the head. It hasn't been a straight line for any of us. We've all gone in different directions to eventually where we are now, 25 years later today. And it is that thing to allow, I suppose, opportunities to come your way, because it's not going to be a straight line.
Totally. I mean, you and I were in the same, we did the same college course, and, if we look at all the people that we were in college with, all the things that they're doing, they're all, where they ended up all kind of makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah. And it's all largely speaking within the arts, but it's not necessarily what we would have thought. Any of us would have thought of each other 25 years ago. We would say, well, that person would be directing movies, that person would be directing movies. And that isn't how it's worked out at all. But like, everyone's happy with where they are. And it like I said, it's not a straight, it is a bouncy kind of line that goes all over the place. And it takes in lots of different crazy things. And people end up where they're supposed to end up, Yeah.
And finally then, what advice would you give to someone working with an editor?
Oh, God. I mean, that's an interesting one. Every editor is different, and every editor has their own kind of idiosyncratic kind of things. You'll find out what they kind of are. I know I have my own idiosyncratic things. Yeah, I think like just be prepared, give them the space, give an editor the space to kind of figure out what they want to do. You've hired the editor to be a voice in the room. Let them be a voice in the room and let them do their own thing every so often. And be kind of open. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've always worked with like directors that I've got on with. You know, there's been very few that I've had any sort of kind of issue with at all. I don't think any really, and that makes it a lot easier. And I think being sound goes both ways. Yeah. Director is sound and the editor, I'd like to think that I'm fairly sound with people, that like it just kind of helps everything kind of go along. You make better work because of it, and I think be passionate, be passionate about the work and turn up, that's the thing. And that goes both ways as well. Director turns up, you turn up, and you do the job, and that's it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Continued success, John.
Thanks, Garry, and you too. Yes, yeah.
Look forward to seeing you on stage with an Oscar one of the days.
Bit away from that yet, Horst. Yes, but yeah, we'll see.
Garry Talks Film, kindly supported by Grace on Demand, Skillnet, and the Rap Commission.